A woman who had long since crossed the half-century mark had always perceived her own existence as a grand theatrical performance, and herself as its undisputed prima donna. She had mastered the art of capturing and holding an audience's attention like no other. Circumstances once led her to visit her daughter and son-in-law, Igor. Their country house was spotless and immaculate, as if lifted straight from the glossy pages of a lifestyle magazine, yet it exuded a dull monotony, as lifeless and uninspiring as the instruction manual for a household appliance. From the very first glance, it was clear that the air was steeped in routine, something this woman found profoundly repulsive. Igor was the very picture of an ordinary man, one of millions. Around 35 years old, his face, though pleasant, bore the unmistakable marks of chronic exhaustion. He seemed to carry an invisible, impossibly heavy backpack filled with daily chores and obligations. He worked in a typical office, wore impeccably pressed shirts cared for by his wife Anna, and, judging by his dimmed gaze, had long forgotten what it felt like to be truly alive and brimming with energy. Anna, her own flesh and blood, was fundamentally kind and decent, but overly proper and cautious. Their marriage resembled unsweetened tea, drinkable, perhaps, but utterly devoid of pleasure, bland and tasteless. Watching them over dinner, the woman silently exclaimed, "Good Lord, this place needs dynamite to jolt them out of this deep slumber." And it seemed she herself was that very catalyst, the spark capable of igniting fire in this dreary, monotonous existence. The first night in their new home arrived. Precisely at midnight, as the clock hands met at the top of the dial, Galina Viktorovna, wrapped in her exquisite cherry-red silk robe, descended silently to the kitchen. Her motive was less a desire for tea and more a keen awareness that the situation demanded her active, decisive presence. Moonlight filtered through the kitchen window, casting an ethereal glow, while the refrigerator hummed monotonously like an old, out-of-tune accordion. Leaning against the cool countertop, she pondered how she might inject some vitality into this seemingly unshakable routine. At that very moment, Igor appeared in the doorway. Dressed only in sweatpants and a t-shirt, his hair tousled, he looked bewildered, as if he'd accidentally wandered into a space entirely foreign to him. "Galina Viktorovna," he asked quietly, clearly startled to find her there. "Why aren't you asleep?" Galina Viktorovna rewarded him with a faint, barely perceptible smile, continuing to stir her spoon slowly in her mug, though it contained nothing but hot water. She knew well that men in such situations tend to lose their composure if given too much time to think. And she, it must be said, was a true virtuoso at crafting precisely such loaded pauses. "Oh, Igor," she drawled, leaning forward slightly so that the cascading silk of her robe subtly revealed her shoulder. There was not a hint of vulgarity in the gesture, only a delicate, almost imperceptible suggestion. "At my age," she continued, "sleep becomes a luxury." "But do you suffer from insomnia too?" Igor visibly flustered, scratching the back of his head in an instinctive attempt to look away, though Galina Viktorovna clearly saw his eyes flicker involuntarily over the elegant curve of her silhouette. She smiled inwardly. Men, at their core, were so predictable. "Yeah, I just wanted some water," he finally managed, hastily opening the refrigerator door, which slammed shut with far more noise than necessary, betraying his unease. "Water?" Galina Viktorovna gave an ironic chuckle, gracefully sweeping a strand of hair from her face. "Igor, are you really sure all you need is water? It seems to me that everyone in this house is missing something far sharper, something capable of shaking up this settled routine." Igor froze. His hand gripped the water bottle tightly, as if it were his only lifeline against the mounting tension. Galina Viktorovna stepped closer, placing her mug gently on the table. Her voice deepened, becoming almost velvety, enveloping. "You know, in my youth, I believed life's essence lay in stability. But with time, I realized, true stability often becomes synonymous with a sleeping soul. And you, Igor, you give the impression of someone who's been at rest far too long." He coughed awkwardly, struggling to regain control over both the situation and his own emotions. "Galina Viktorovna, what exactly are you talking about?" he asked, trying to grasp her meaning. "Oh, stop pretending," she replied with a light smirk, brushing her fingers ever so slightly against his shoulder. Her flawless manicure glinted like a tiny beacon in the moonlight, drawing his gaze. "You're bored, Igor, aren't you?" And Galina Viktorovna does not tolerate boredom. Trapped in this awkward moment, Igor swallowed hard, his demeanor that of a rabbit frozen before a python. Yet this python stood before him as a woman draped in a luxurious silk robe, exuding the subtle, refined scent of sandalwood perfume. She wasn't aiming for outright seduction, rather, she excelled at kindling that spark within a person, the one capable of shattering their habitual existence. In this art, she had no equal. "Anya's asleep," Igor whispered, as if those words could shield him from what was unfolding. "Anya is indeed asleep," Galina Viktorovna agreed, leaning in just enough for him to feel the warmth of her breath. "But you, Igor, are wide awake, and so am I. So what shall we do with all this wakefulness?" A heavy silence settled over the room, like a velvet curtain descending before an intermission, heralding something significant. Igor's eyes darted nervously between her face, rich with unspoken meaning, and the kitchen doorway, as if searching for an escape route. Galina Viktorovna knew full well he wouldn't leave. Not now. Men of his age, especially those mired in the swamp of daily routine, like flies stuck in sweet syrup, rarely walked away from such moments. They feared them, yet subconsciously craved them. He addressed her formally, "Galina Viktorovna." She cut him off at once. "Call me Galia," she suggested playfully, even Galechka, accompanied by a teasing wink. She added that Viktorovna was for formal institutions like the tax office, implying their conversation was anything but official. His nervous laugh confirmed her tactics were working. The fish was on the hook. Though her aim wasn't so much to catch him as to shake him thoroughly. She sensed this house, this settled life, needed a real earthquake, and she was more than ready to trigger it. He repeated softly, "Galia," tasting the unfamiliar name on his tongue. Then, hesitantly, he asked if she was always like this. She narrowed her eyes slightly, folding her arms across her chest in a way that caused her robe to part just enough to reveal her neck. The gesture held nothing overtly provocative, yet it was more than enough to quicken his pulse. He fumbled for words before finally murmuring, "So direct, so vivid." "Igor," she sighed, as though patiently explaining something to a child, "life is too short. If a person doesn't strive to be vivid, what's the point of even getting out of bed? And you haven't woken up with the right mood in far too long." He flushed noticeably, and she quietly marked the moment as another small victory. "All right," she said, stepping back toward the door. "Enough circling around. Get on with it, before I change my mind." Her silk robe rustled with each movement, like a banner heralding triumph. This wasn't just another night, it was the true beginning of something new. Did he like how things were unfolding? Igor hadn't yet realized that his stable, familiar life had just cracked wide open. And Galina Viktorovna was the one who'd caused that fateful rupture. The next morning at breakfast, Igor carefully avoided Galina Viktorovna's gaze, but with her habitual perceptiveness, she noticed every detail of his behavior. She didn't miss the slight tremor in his hand as he poured his coffee with intense concentration. Anna, sweet girl, was utterly absorbed in her phone, seemingly oblivious to the palpable tension hanging in the air. Meanwhile, Galina Viktorovna slowly savored her avocado toast, already imagining how the familiar walls of this house would soon transform into a theatrical stage. On that stage, she was destined to play a dual role, both the insightful director guiding the unfolding drama and the dazzling star commanding everyone's attention. Inside, she felt compelled to remind Igor, and men in general, that human existence isn't confined to mundane concerns like making soup or doing laundry. Life, in her deepest conviction, was an untamable flame, a source of passion and inspiration. And Galina Viktorovna was utterly certain of her unique ability to ignite that flame, making it burn brighter and stronger. Their secret, intrigue-laden meetings began almost immediately after that memorable midnight tea, which had become the starting point of a new chapter in their relationship. Yet these encounters, born in an atmosphere of anticipation, were entirely devoid of conventional romance.